Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of our Lightning interview series. So as always, we like to make these sessions interesting and interactive. So please do, when you have a chance, introduce yourself on the chat, tell us where you're joining from and what you do. And I do believe there's a free ticket giveaway also, so take advantage of that. Now, as you well know, today's interview is with Akira Shibata. And Akira, you may know already, he's a renowned data scientist in Japan who led the growth of DataRobot Japan as CEO until June 2021. Currently, he's Chief Operating Officer at Qosmo. In addition to his current role, he has a background in entrepreneurship and experimental particle physicist. He was at LHC and the world-famous CERN. And he's also worked at hundreds of companies in deploying advanced analytics and digital transformation projects. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about with Akira. But before we start, I want to have a few quick words, as always, about upcoming events at ODSC. So a lot going on as we come out of summer. September 1st, next week, we continue our Lightning interview series. And then, of course, September 7th and 8th, we have our ODSC APAC, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But excited that we're trying a bit of a hybrid thing there. We're starting some meetups around ODSC APAC as well. So we will have one in Bangalore and Milan, our first meetup ever in Milan, and our first in-person meetup in Bangalore in about, I would say, 2 years. Eventually, we'll get back to ODSC India, maybe next year. And in addition to that, we have ODSC West coming up in San Francisco. Again, we were back in person last year, limited capacity. This year, I think we'll be at full scale. But of course, ODSC APAC. So we've over 50 speakers presenting there over 2 days, and we hope to welcome over 2,000 attendees. I think we've doubled that number registered, and virtual passes are still available. And as the slide says, it's a virtual event that you cannot afford to miss, especially since it's free. So do check that out. We've got some really interesting topics there. You can go check out the schedule. And also, we have AI Pluses ongoing. This live stream interview will be recorded. As with all the others, it's on AI Plus training. I think we've got well over 1,000 video and courses in our free library there. And then we have paid longer certificate courses. So do check that out. And if you're in the market for a job, check out AI Plus Careers. It's an NLP recommendation engine we built ourselves. We take your CV and we match jobs out there, any job in the market. So check that out. I think that'll be very helpful for your career. And I believe that is it. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Akira.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. It's been a long time, Akira.
Good to see you, Seamus.
So listen, everyone's excited to hear about the topics of today's discussion, democratizing. How far can we take democratizing AI and data? But let's set a bit of context here. Tell us a bit about your background.
My background is in between tech and business. I like to put myself right in the middle. I was listening to you introducing me. I have a physics background in academic training, but also I started my business career as a consultant at BCG. Then I founded my own AI media curation company about 10 years ago as a founder CEO. And then I also led big success of DataRobot Japan, which was my immediate last career as a chief data scientist and later as the CEO of the Japan branch of the company. So that's where I come from. I'm currently a chief operating officer at a company called Qosmo, which I will go into in a minute, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we could spend a whole half hour, and we only do have a half hour here. So everybody just please post your questions if you have them for Akira. And yeah, I remember the DataRobot conference used to run in Japan were a huge success. So hopefully we'll see you back in the conference space sometime soon. And Akira, by the way, is, of course, speaking at ODSC APAC, and a topic we'll get into a bit later. Yeah, so Akira, tell us about your current role as Chief Operating Officer at Qosmo.
Yeah, I am a bit of an everything guy, doing everything between tech and business. And operating the company as a whole. But since I don't think many people know about the company, Qosmo is a company that applies AI to the field of creativity. And that means we use AI in creation of our own artwork, as well as democratizing, which is the topic today, deep learning technology for the creators by developing our own products. And we have a strong focus in music and sound related technologies. And most recently, we released a product called Newtone, which allows musicians to use latest deep learning models in their production.
Wow, pretty impressive. Would love to get into that a little bit more as we head down discussion, but let's get to the main topic, which is the current state of democratizing AI. And I know that's synonymous for machine learning, data science, and whatnot. So where do you think we are currently? Because when we started, we used to be the Boston Data Festival back in 2013. Then we became the Open Data Science Conference because I was really enamored with the the whole open source data science community, the contributors there, what they were building. Back in 2013, 2014, I was using it in finance, and I thought what was available for free was hands down better than what was available, proprietary platforms.
Mm-hmm.
I was really enamored by that, and I want to give a soapbox to it as well. And I was kind of a bit disillusioned by open data because I was using a lot of open data, but I found open data was very finite. So we had this whole open data movement. Now it's more moving into democratizing AI, which is an even bigger lift than open data, right? Because as hard it is to provide open data, democratizing AI in all its forms it's quite a challenge. So yeah, where do you think the current state is at the moment?
Yeah, it's a big question, right? And
Yeah.
I see probably like three phases within the sort of, if I look at AI, right, there is a service phase, right? That's sort of like end user interacting. But also there is inference, and then also there is training, right? I mean, usually in the direction of the processing, it goes training, inference, and service. And I think from service perspective, it's already many people use it without even realizing it, right? Like especially on online services. Um, Obviously it's most advanced in those areas where like contents are consumed and everybody is a victim of the TikTok AI, right? And spending a lot of time like under the influence of AI. So from that perspective, it's highly democratized already. If you look at inference, right, like are people directly interacting with AI, trained AI to get output? It's one of the things that's been developing very rapidly, even just in the last 2 weeks, right? We have seen like Mid Journey, we have seen like Stable Diffusion, DALI 2, all of these things have showed up. And, we really like coming to a very interesting time in the history where things are really beginning to change. And like people have started talking about this like prompt engineering, like starting to come up with trying to come up with like interesting way to input to the AI model. And that's like we've never really seen that much of it before, of like people trying to learn how to directly interact with AI models. And that's because like those AI models are powerful and the interface to it is more human, which in this case is text. And that's very fast, rapidly developing area. And if you look at the training of AI, I think it's a state of big mix and flux, right? On the one side, automation tools like DataRobot, for one, it has made it possible for enterprise users to self-service model training. And usually these are with a traditional machine learning rather than deep learning, though it has really developed a lot of use cases across the, what you mentioned in finance, logistics, retail, you name
Right.
it. And then there is another side of it where there's a handful of players are training these huge deep learning models with like billions of parameters and input data. And there are places like Hugging Face that's building infrastructure for these types of models. And Weights and Biases is one of my favorite tool to automate some of the development process of these ambitious AI. But it's very far-fetched to think that this type of AI training can really be democratized in any near future.
Yeah, and no, absolutely. It's like when we say it changes rapidly, it does seem like it's changing every week. And one of the things we keep a close eye on is the number of parameters these large language models have. And yeah, what is PaLM is like 540 billion parameters.
Right.
Long gone are the days when you had like 20 or 30 parameters in your Excel spreadsheet.
Right.
Yeah, and as far as democratizing AI, like these are my own opinions, not ODSC's at all. As the staff would tell you, I'm part-time there at best. But yeah, I'm very concerned about large language models because just these are challenging. Just to fine tune these models is challenging. And we just Google came out with a paper. I think actually it was just last week, or was it Monday? I read it. It just keeps the evidence keeps coming in that large language models are just better and better, right? So brute force is winning, and that is so inaccessible to the ordinary data scientist, and certainly the ordinary citizen data scientist. So and that's the big question here. So what are some of the main roadblocks that you're seeing for democratizing AI and data? And now they have this whole thing, Andrew Ning, data-driven AI. But anyway, maybe I'm asking too many questions at once. But what are the roadblocks that you see?
I mean, there are a lot of great problems to solve, right? For just from a perspective of democratizing and creating more value, more fun out of it. And I think the biggest thing though is the people's imagination in how to apply these technologies to the real world use cases. And I think there's more tech now than we can really use, and that's why coming up with new and creative ideas on how to apply AI to real world problem is where I enjoy the most and where there is a lot of value created. But of course, there are more technical issues as well, right? GPUs are still very expensive. NVIDIA is keeping it very expensive, very consciously. Apple and NVIDIA isn't doing very well, and there's a vacuum for development of AI on a very common platform for a pretty long time, although Apple has been putting their act together with their Apple Silicon on the GPU side as well. And of course, there is an issue with data and some of the more organizational issues in data being siloed in big organizations. That's a big roadblock to enterprise AI still. And of course, there is a skill gap. Especially in Japan, people talk a lot about not having enough digital skills in general, data science, AI engineering included. And the great news is that you can get paid a lot of money if you do have these skills, and you can even stay in research to get paid very well lately. The bad news is that it's not much. There's not many real world engineering that's happening, and that's the background to why there is so many interesting technologies that are there with not as much happening to try and apply that to interesting new use cases.
No, and I love your entrepreneurial spirit, because you started off that question talking about the opportunities there and the challenges of the opportunities there, because it's very easy to get down about the challenges ahead, but again, as technologists, we're here to solve these problems. So I love that mindset. And a kind of a key question here as we talk about democratizing AI. Again, you mentioned training. Where does training data comes from? We all know where it comes from. So, at ODSC, we've, for the last 2 years, and ODSC East this year was our big push on that. We started really to promote machine learning safety, sometimes called AI safety. There's other terms for machine learning safety and security. Pretty broad, Big 10 topic. But do you think that's techniques, speaking of opportunity, like I see people trying to solve this. So you got techniques like differential privacy, federated learning, do you think there's opportunity there that they'll help with democratizing AI, or it's still too low level?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of risks that we need to be aware of, and that's privacy for one, and even the services that AI provide are by itself jeopardizing our sort of freedom per se. And
Yeah,
one of the things that we worked on at Qosmo was to develop this apparel clothing that um, um, won't get the surveillance camera to recognize you as a human if you're wearing it. And
nice.
yeah, that was a bit of a gimmick, but
Wow, yeah, that's pretty cool.
yeah, creative use cases of AI to sort of it's an antithesis for AI, but like AI used against AI kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
no, exactly. The whole
yeah,
adversarial AI
yeah.
thing.
So I think AI itself can be useful in making AI right in some cases. What you mentioned about data privacy obviously is a very important issue as well. Because a big part of AI is like how services can be customized and personalized for people's taste.
Exactly.
Services for one, advertising for another. That's a big business. But I think we really do need to look much further than how to show advertisements to people efficiently when we talk about AI and like data privacy, federated learning. Those things can be very helpful in some areas, but I think we have a much bigger region of potential applications for AI.
No, to me, the whole question is fascinating because the open source community has done such a good job in creating the tools to democratize AI. So you want to build your own AI models. There's tons of frameworks out there:
Hmm.
PyTorch, Scikit-learn, Pandas, you name it. TensorFlow, of course. So I think the the data engineering side of it is I wouldn't say a solved problem because doing it at scale is still pretty expensive. The software is definitely there. The data side of it to me is still fascinating because I don't believe there's enough open data out there to democratize data science. In the end of the day, like you said, when you're customizing these services, you have to use a lot of your own personal data, other people's personal data. So I do things like techniques that keep this data private is fascinating, and I do think there's big opportunity there as well because I, for one, can't wait to sell all my data and still keep it private and sell it for a lot of money. Right? Because yeah, so every platform you use, that data that all these entities are collecting is very valuable, and I think eventually there's going to be there should be some reciprocal market for that, and I see there's some folks working there all already. So so you mentioned Japan and the challenges of getting more people trained up in data science and technology there. So if that's the case currently, like how does that feed into Japan's approach on AI governance and AI in general?
um, Japan generally is a country that loves technology. I don't know what your impression about Japan and technology, but I think many
I
people
was
have.
there for ODSC
Yeah,
Japan, and so I love the technology in Japan.
yeah. I think Japan likes to
Awesome.
perfect it, right? And like use technology to really like, run the infrastructure. Bullet trains come always like on time to the second. I think Japan has one of the most advanced like logistics network, and you know it's I was in the enterprise world in Japan, and I could feel a lot of excitement of people wanting to find out what is in AI for them. So I think that generally makes a great opportunity for any AI companies to do business in Japan. And also that's because Japan doesn't have a lot of great research going on with AI. I think Japan has been taking a back seat in terms of AI research, and there's not a lot of like deep tech AI original stuff coming out from it. So it ends up having to depend on the tech and services coming from abroad. which is a great news for if you are developing
Yeah.
great services and products in AI. Japan would make a great opportunity for them. And also given the interest and excitement in using these technologies in the real world problem, and realizing that Japan is a highly aging society, and the government realizes it and making conscious decisions to really strategically steer the country's direction towards digital transformation, and being putting in a lot of money into mostly like people, digital skills development in people. But obviously that's going to take a long time, and I think until those things are start to take hold,
Yeah,
I
it's
think it just is a
fascinating.
more opportunity for anybody who is in AI business to come to
No,
Japan.
absolutely. So you're basically saying the government is embracing it, and we see that there's big AI initiatives in India, for sure, that I'm
Yeah,
aware of. The US, of course, UK, Europe. So you see a lot of government initiatives that I think people should be tuned into, because there's definitely opportunity there. So going on to a bit of a fun topic. So you just released a white paper with a colleague on an overview of AI music creation as potential. And I think we have a link there, if the team can share that link with our audience. It was fascinating to me, like those. So I know you're an expert, much more than me, so on this topic. But there was it was FN Mika got its own record deal from Capitol Records like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Huge news. Then I think yesterday they were dropped, which is controversial. But yeah, so that's that's insane, right? So you can create an AI engine that can get its own record deal. So it's another entrepreneurial output for all of us data science and machine learning engineers. So yeah, what's your take on that?
yeah, for sure. I mean, that FM Mika stuff didn't happen, but if it doesn't happen today, it's happening tomorrow, right? It's just
Yeah,
anytime now kind of thing. And I would be surprised if some of the music that I listen to on Spotify was actually AI, right? Without me realizing it.
exactly.
They have all the data to do it, and I
Well, I
think
have
the
already listened
technology
to
is
some
there.
good mixes that were definitely AI generated.
Yeah, and I think AI has interesting use cases for music because, for instance, it can keep generating music forever, right? Which is pretty hard for human to do. It's great for like I listen to a lot of AI generated music when I am working and when I need to focus, because like it keeps on playing and it doesn't stop at when the
Full time.
song finishes,
Yeah,
or I don't have to repeat it. If you repeat it, you hear the same song over and over again, you get tired of it. But it doesn't happen with AI. So I think there are good use cases in music for AI, and it's kind of a new area that the technology is creating in terms of how music can be used in a functional way. So it might not be as enjoyable in a true art sense of it, but it is not to say that there is a huge opportunity for it.
yeah, it's a fascinating field to follow, because I was just reading a few days ago that folks are trying to patent AI generated art with cans and whatnot, and it's, I think, some court, I don't know if it was a federal or state court or whatever, was in the US, but said it could not be patented. But I'm sure they're going to continue to fight that. So I do see a few questions here that we are going to ask, but one last one from me, Akira. So you're
Hmm.
speaking at ODSE APAC in 2 short weeks, like a week and a half. Can you tell our audience what your talk is going to be about?
Yeah, I will talk a little bit about the white paper and what I learned through the research for the white paper, which there was a lot of interesting findings. I will focus a little bit on the product that I talked about, Newtone, which is our attempt at trying to bring the latest AI technologies to people like audio and sound engineers. And I think when things become interesting is not when we are replacing human musicians, right? I mean, what's
Right.
that's a grim future. It may happen in some cases, and I don't think we should cry over it too much. But I think what's really interesting is when people can develop and advance their creativity with AI, right? Whether using AI as a tool or using it as more of a, inspirational creative partner, because
Yeah.
AI is a lot more than just a tool for us, and that's the kind of possibilities that we're exploring, and that's going to be the topic of my talk at ODSC.
No, I think that's excellent. And I definitely subscribe to that view because we've had a few guests on here from the art world discussing that topic. And yeah, I think AI is to art what the camera was to photography. It didn't replace paintings by any means. It became its own art medium. So let's see here. So Ravi has a question. I think we might have answered something. His question was about what are your views on data literacy? He mentions data maturing, data governance. We already covered that. So yeah, so what are your views on data literacy in the context of democratizing AI, I guess? Yeah.
Data literacy.
Yeah, data literacy. We actually did a course on data literacy. I did one a couple of months ago and just helping people understand data, because I think people try and jump straight into AI and get into machine learning models and gradient descent and, understanding rules-based versus, pattern-based technology. And then, I always start with very basic understanding data, understanding, cells in a spreadsheet, things like that. Yeah.
I think it's it's a common sense now, right? Like we look at data to make decisions. Like people, I mean, if you look at like COVID, like you look at the data every day, right, to decide what to do on the day, and like that's the time that we live in, and you are. What was interesting to me, like at the Olympics last year, was like I thought like people who are smarter, people who are able to use data in a smart way, were sometimes the people who are winning, even in those areas like sports. And it's just the general ability that we all need to acquire in living well. So that's how important it is, I believe.
No, that's a very interesting observation, because every single day I was looking at the John Hopkins chart data, playing around with the tweakings. In data science, you're supposed to be a data visualization expert, and I definitely think it improved my skills. And yeah, I think the prevalence of these data tools are making people data literate to a certain degree. And I think that's a good observation, because I think people have a better foundation in data and data literacy, even just a better understanding of it than someone would 10 years ago, because a lot of people understand how recommendation systems work now, right? So they may not understand the actual workings of a recommendation system, but they know a recommendation system when they see it. And they also have an intuitive sense when it doesn't work, right? You're in your browser and you're not in incognito mode, and you Google generators, and all of a sudden you're seeing power generators pop up in all your ads and stuff like that. So Marco Giuseppe had an interesting question, which I'm not sure how to answer. There are interrelationships between the cognitive learning systems related with big data science and development of mind artificial structures. Well, you're the neural net expert here. Sure, if you want to take this question while I look to see if there's any more.
So the relationship between systems that learns on big data and development of mind artificial structures. Mind artificial is like AI is becoming like sentient and stuff.
Either that or Elon Musk's neural net or something like that. Well, let's take the first one. AI becoming sentient. I forget the name of the video. I was just fired.
No, I mean, one thing is that deep learning is very interesting architecture, right? Because it sort of unifies a lot of what we consider as very distinct. For example, it's the same architecture can very well model music and text, for example, right? And you don't often think about how close they are. They feel like very different thing to us, but there's a lot of generalization you can make if you use deep learning and data. Same with visual images. All of these different perceptions, channels of perceptions are unified through the mechanism of data and modeling through neural networks. So not entirely sure what is the correlation this question is drawing, but the likelihood is that these are all pretty well connected through the same architecture.
Yeah, and I think Gary Marcus came out and did his controversial paper, was it 3 or 4 years ago, saying that neural networks, deep learning is kind of a dead end. We're going to peak pretty soon, but I haven't gone back and looked at what his views are yet. But I think with the advent of large language models and these getting better, maybe there is more there in cognitive learning systems, like how neural networks emulates the mind. So again, we can sit back and wait and see. It's a fascinating thing to see, but the models keep getting better. And there is definitely a school of thought that says that they are emulating the cognitive learning systems. And like you, I'm very plugged into the startup and AI space, and there's been a lot of people, very smart people, migrating to what they call is it AGI or AIG startups?
AGI, yeah.
AGI, artificial general intelligence,
right?
Sentiment like, and I don't subscribe to that at all. So again, these are my views, not ODSC, because one of the things I'm really fascinated about is what multimodal systems, right? So if you combine all these AIs, like a great speech recognition system, like Google Home or Alexa or Siri, to great computer vision, to well-trained models, it's you can't tell because it'll feel like it's the AGI, but really it's a multimodal. And I think AI to AI is fascinating as well. So I think there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike in the next year or 2 years. It's going to look like AGI, and people will claim it's AGI, but I think it's just multimodal, which again is using many models, and that's what we've been doing in hardware a lot. Mixing hardware and software and all that kind of stuff. So regardless, fascinating. But Akira, we could stay here for the next half hour, next hour, and chat away all day, but we did want to keep the lightning in the lightning interview.
Yeah,
which we haven't done a very good job of as of late. So I do want to wrap this up. Very excited to hear your talk at ODSC APAC in a few weeks. Thank you again. You were a speaker last year. So, please follow Akira and his work. He and his team do fascinating stuff. Check him out on LinkedIn. And Akira, thank you. Can't thank you enough for joining us once again. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in either very early or very late in your evening. So we'll see you again next week. Bye now.
Thank you very much for listening.